You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and today we have the winner of the Virginia Bass Nation Kayak Series event that was held on Chick Lake and the Chickahominy River. Ross McVey, dude, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Hello.
So, as always, what got you into fishing?
I found my first time I have recollection of fishing was a very young child there, Lily, around about 11 or 12. Um, my parents had lived in Liberia, Africa, where my father worked at a mine many years ago. So this was around, 71 or so, 72. And I got the opportunity to go fish in the Lone Pine River in the middle of the desert there in California. And I remember catching a catfish, on a hook and line bobber thing. And my father didn't fish, but he just took me out there and so forth. And I think that got me hooked. So they went on. We then ended up moving to Florida, where I lived in a place called Mount Dora, Florida. And you know where all the lakes are in Lake County, Florida, is down there. And this is, of course, in the 70s. And my family's home was as such that I could walk from where it was with my fishing pole and go down to along Lake Dora there. And I used to go fishing, for literally massive crappie and bass there, from the bank. And I would, catch something there, some big fish. And I met a gentleman who had a houseboat there, and he used to go fishing there, and he would be on the other side, on the marina side, and I'd be on the other, and he would show me some of the fish he caught there. They were unbelievable, and it kind of always got me into just that. I joined the Army at age 18, and I didn't really get to do that much because I was literally gone. I was gone, you name it, to all over the world. I was in the Army in the 1st Ranger Battalion in Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia, back in the 80s, back when we had the Iranian hostage situation, et cetera, et cetera. And I really didn't get that time. Then I went to my next unit, which was Fort Bragg, and a bunch of other units there, and I kind of was not able to do as much. Lo and behold, I eventually, back around it was about 91, 92 and all that. I was stationed in Fort Polk, Louisiana at that time. And I started slipping back and wanted to do that. And of all things, duck hunting. I ran dogs in field trials there under UKC. Had a good friend of mine named Bimbo
That's
West. Cool. And I was actually getting into being a committee member in Ducks Unlimited, et cetera, et cetera. So I loved the outdoors. Every place I wanted to be stationed was always based upon the ruralness end of that. I didn't want to be in an urban center type of thing, of stuff. The one place I wanted to go in the military and never could get to was Alaska. I mean, I could have gone to Hawaii, 10 times over, but it wasn't my cup of tea. But Alaska, I could never get to. But my next place after Louisiana was to be in Fort Drum, New York. By then, I had a family, and I had a real bad health condition that came up due to military service. I got what was called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and it made me a paraplegic for about 6 months. And kind of the deal that you made to myself and my wife of the time and all that made is I could buy a boat. So I bought a John boat and, rigged it all up there, like most people, kind of the improvised realm of things. I used to go out on a place called the Indian River up there. And you want to talk about catching fish? It was like as virgin as you could be. I could get off work, and 45 minutes later, I was in the water catching massive bass and pike. Oh, it was fantastic. I'd bring my kids and my wife out there, and, they were young, but it was a time for bonding and enjoying nature as can be. Time passed from there, a couple deployments, and then I retired, and I moved down to Virginia. And I moved to Virginia because it kind of fit what would be my future. close enough to the world that I liked, but also close enough to the world that I had to slave to also. I knew I had to, and that sort of stuff. I eventually end up with the job I had. I had to deploy overseas a couple of times in the Middle East, which was good and bad. I had to earn money, and I did earn some serious amount of money, which would help as time went on with many, many things that went on.
Are you allowed to say when you served?
I was in the Army from 1979 to 2004.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, December of 79 to January of 04, was the time period I served. And then, again, back to the Northern Virginia thing, I wasn't originally going to go be a contractor overseas, but a friend of mine did the brother, I could use your help there. And since we had known each other for many years, I went over and got basically hired, not sight unseen. My reputation had preceded me, and proceeded to be involved in the war against the United States and terror going on there. And I ended up going to work for an organization called JIEDO, Joint IED Defeat Organization, and then, like I say, deploying overseas as a counter IED operation integrator. Long scheme it there, helped units in their fight against IEDs.
And this is after
There.
2004 when you were a contractor?
No. There'd be a little bit. There was a little bit of a gap there. I did some other stuff, but same sort of stuff, but not overseas. And then eventually overseas stuff and all. Got done with that. Then did some other, as people like to refer to, three-letter agency stuff in Northern Virginia, and just leave that stuff at that. And eventually, I retired. Now, in there, kind of help on the retirement was I had my first total knee replacement because it was shot from jumping out of airplanes one time too many, I guess you would say. And then literally last year, I had my second one there, and a lot of other little nuances of health issues in between. We'll talk about that in a second, I guess. But back to '04. So as I got out, I had this John boat. But, as you well know, the biggest body of water in the area was the Potomac River. And some areas, I was in Haymarket, Virginia. And the biggest, problem was that, I didn't want to go to the upper Potomac, too many rocks for my John boat. I didn't want to damage it for my thinking. And the Potomac River, it was great, but, Tidal, I wasn't used to it yet. And the thought of being, stranded somewhere scared the bejeebies out of me. So lo and behold, I see, posting is an ad for buying a used Hank Parker edition Outback Hobie kayak. I bought it. It was literally the first of the models. It was, look at me type of thing. And all of a sudden, I got this addiction. Oh my God, what addiction it was, because I could be on the water. I mean, John boat, I could be by myself in tranquility, but I still had the motor that was there. So it's kind of like, you had to have, some buzz to get you to do something. But this kayak, I could go into skinny water. I could do things that no bass boat, no other boat could do. And I could be by myself. And I was at a point in my life I needed that. So I would go out in that. I would go out, and I was going out on that all the time. Then I did some other bodies of water, and I fished, and I could put it in the back of my pickup truck bed, and it was nirvana. I could park in places that, like an ordinary car, and I could launch that thing. It was lightweight stuff. But like everything else and all that, then came out the newer model. Back to the type of work I did and all that, I call it the asymmetrical warfare. I like to deal with innovation and technology because you can't run away from it there. So things are starting to happen in the kayak world, and add a fish finder here or add this to it there. And I started doing those things. And the Hank Parker edition was great. But then Hobie came out with this thing called the Pro Angler. I couldn't stand up on the Outback very well. It was just, for a big guy, it was not, really conducive. You could stand, but not effectively. So the Pro Angler, oh my goodness, that changed things. Now I could stay out there long because the seat and the drive and everything. And this is before they had the reverse drive on it there. I got literally the first one that was sold at a kayak dealer that used to be in Woodbridge. I got the very first one there. Um, and that was changing everything. My sons then could be in my Outback. It was a smaller, and I could take them both out, both in the back of my pickup truck bed, and again, off we would go and doing that. And that was going on and on. Um, then, as you well know, Hobie would, update the model. Then they had a reverse drive. Well, I had to
Mm-hmm.
get that. I did that, and I've been doing that ever since of things and all. And it was my thing. Now, anybody who fishes a pro angler knows it was at some of I'll lead into that from the fishing terms. So then I started getting into kayak fishing tournaments. I went to some that there was only a dozen people in there. I didn't win them, but I always would finish, in a pretty damn good spot there. I was learning the ropes, so to speak, there, especially on tidal waters, or we'll call it Virginia waters that's going on. That then led to I started expanding out. And one of my fondest things is doing one of the earliest Yak Attack tournaments down there by Farmville. At which point in time there was only 30 of us that was on that tournament. I was in the middle of the pack. It wasn't anything great or anything bad, but I was there. One of the last ones I ever did down there was nearly 200 people fishing that tournament. So you can see where the change in the glide path of kayak fishing was really starting to take off to, and I was in the midst of it. Mind you, I'm now this
Mm-hmm.
contractor, and I have to go overseas periodically and do the things that I'm doing there. So there's
How long
pauses
were you
here.
gone for?
I would be
Just
gone for,
randomly.
6 months, 8 months,
Okay.
times like that, that's gone. But, it always seemed to happen in prime time fishing
Yeah.
season there, it is what it is. You got to make the
Oh.
money. It helped pay for my kids' college education there, because I was able, instead of spending money, I put it into their 529 plans. So when they walked across the stage later on in life, debt free, it allowed me in my life debt free, LOL, of things to do, stuff. So I've moved up on kayaks. I've done these things, and my health is kind of starting to change and all that. And I've had several things that's going on there. By then, my parents. Well, I'd had a divorce also in this time there that goes on, and then I met somebody else who helped me through a lot of things there, because the divorce had really wrecked me, that went on. But my parents were down in Florida getting very old. I would go down to visit them, and I would even take kayaks with me. Had a couple of interesting things with gators down there, and my youngest son and I encountering gators in a canal there in Lake County, Florida, on the Dead River. That was not a fun experience there. Luckily, thank Almighty Lord, nothing happened. But as my parents got older, um, there became a challenge. What is going to happen? What's the plan? And they were initially first him and haw, now. A hurricane comes, and I literally had to kidnap. I say it live here. I kidnapped them, and they would go on and say it was the best thing I ever did for them, because again, they couldn't make decisions. My father had his Parkinson's and a little bit of dementia, and my mother was definitely going down the pathway with dementia and all that. And I brought him up here to Florida, or not from Florida, up to Virginia and all that, and got him situated, with the life situation there that's going on. And, that and the work I was doing, doing 12-hour shifts of things there became a little bit more than it. Eventually, they said, screw it. I had enough money from my military retirement and money I'd set aside, and I retired. My new wife, then my second wife, was still working, but she was now starting to slow down to only 3 days a week and all that. She loved to work, and
Mm-hmm.
that was the irony of all things. I didn't. She allowed me and encouraged me even to go and do all the fishing tournaments I wanted to do. This is when I started doing, I call the travel tournaments. Started doing them in Kentucky Lake. I may do a trip where, Kentucky Lake, or it was uh, 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 one lake that was near there, then Kentucky Lake, then up to Ohio on the Sandusky area, and then over to La Crosse and all that. I did 4 tournaments in this 3 week time period. Bang, 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 plus some pre-fishing in between and all that was going on. It was actually 4 weeks, correction, of stuff. And I did all that sort of stuff there, and she absolutely encouraged. And I got the bug. Oh boy, did I love doing that sort of stuff. There was a little bit of competitiveness there, a little bit of camaraderie there, and the tranquility of doing these things. And she was doing her thing. She wasn't into fishing like that, but she loved me being happy. Then I did a tournament down to Santee Cooper. That was the second scary time with a gator encounter there. And then I did a one on Florida in middle of January in Lake Seminole there, getting hung up on a cypress stump for an hour and a half in freezing cold weather, trying to get that kayak off of that stump. Took everything I could do. And I had the same encounter later on a Toledo Bend, type of tournament that's going on. So safety, and a plan of action when you do things would be something I would develop a very keen sense as time goes on and doing all these tournaments. Then I did some tournaments in Georgia. I mean, you name it, I did all things. And a huge thing from, like I say, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Mississippi River, down to Texas, and all that, Florida, up to upstate New York, where I just did a Lake Champlain tournament there. I've done these things. And, always been, the bridesmaid, never the bride, LOL type of a reference there of these tournaments until recently when I finally won one that goes on. But I did all these things. Now I have to go into my dark, sad world that came up. A little over 3 years ago, my life kind of changed in a very dramatic way. My parents were very aged, and I knew that the time was coming, and I was doing all the things that had to be done, prepare for it. I had no brothers or sisters, and like I say, a very narrow, small family, but a family with sense of duty, loyalty, and love that was going on. And at first, it started with my father finally passed away, and I look at it as a blessing because it was pretty gut wrenching seeing him wither away from the neurological condition of Parkinson's, and he died. And again, I knew that it was what it was. It's such a situation that my mother really didn't even understand. Yet they were in the same assisted living together there because of how her situation was going on. But again, sense of duty, I was going to be there to make sure she was taken care of. Then a couple of months later, one day, my wife, is going to do her middle of the week work, and I kiss her goodbye, and she goes off, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee, and I get a call from her that she was on her way to the emergency room, and her boss was taking her there. And well, what's going on? I get to the hospital quicker than she does there, and then she's coming in with her boss and all that. And next thing you know, and all that, they're taking her back for tests. We thought at first, could it have been a mild stroke, but didn't make sense. Didn't have any lifestyle or anything that would make sense there. They did a CT scan and knew that there was something there going on, but they didn't know what. They sent her to Winchester, the next kind of bigger hospital level there, and they would later do a test. And there was speculation that it could be the C word. But all of a sudden, they did that test the next morning, and I'll never forget in my life the doctor coming in, and he didn't say it in these exact words. No, I'm not going to, cause it that. But what he did was say, "Congratulations, you've got cancer. Not only do you have cancer, you probably have the worst cancer you could have, which was glioblastoma, stage 4 of the brain." Now, there has to be this cool thing where you have a multitude of doctors, specialties. They all come together. That would take a couple more days after they would do a biopsy on one of the closest in tumor that they could reach and all that. But yes, that's what it turned out to be: glioblastoma, grade 4, and hell on earth. And you want to talk about a shock? My love of my life, my best friend, my soulmate, has got this. And so I am getting ready to get myself prepared to deal with this. Now, I'll talk only from a point, just to understand time reference. This is when prime season of my fishing life would have been beginning, because a month and a half before this, she and I had taken the camper, my kayak and all that, and gone up to the Susquehanna River to fish a Hobie B.A.S. tournament up there. I'm sorry if I get choked up. She had been this trooper that had been there. And I would go out in the morning to go do that. She's there, and I'd come back, and she would make the most gorgeous meal, for the campsite. She loved to do asymmetrical cooking in a campsite. We would go other places and do these kind of things, whether it was the Outer Banks camping or you name it. We used to have a pontoon boat on Lake Anna that had an enclosure of basically a glorified tent that had a queen size bed, and we'd go spend 4 nights on the Lake Anna. I would go out fishing. She'd wake up, and we'd had a grill thing there that she'd make bacon and eggs and a percolated coffee. We'd do all these things. So all of a sudden, congratulations, you have this. Plan your life, accordingly. And you want to talk about a shock. My life is going to be totally dedicated to give her anything and everything I could. The irony was her father had the same brain cancer at the same age years before. He had lived for a year and a half. She thought she was going to have a year and a half, and she was going to finish up these couple work projects. I'm trying to stop her. No, stop work now. But she had a sense of loyalty and duty to complete a project that was so important for the owners of this company that she was doing. She was a upper management type of thing that was going on. But all of a sudden, she started having more and more problems and all that. And so, of course, with all this now, we're going to try to do anything and everything. She's supposed to start chemotherapy and radiation. We go to the orientation day, and the next morning, she's supposed to go start that. And as we wake up and all that, she literally kind of starts standing up, and she had that glaze in her eyes, and some things happen. I'm not going to go into all that right now, but I'm calling the ambulance. And they're taking her to the same hospital where we first went to in Front Royal. And it doesn't look like she's even going to make it through the day. And this ain't supposed to happen. And I'm now caught in, all those coulda, shoulda, wouldas are not going to happen. They end up giving her this super massive dose of steroids, and it's only due as a stabilizer. Her sons get here, and I'm there, and we're surrounding her, and she's in a coma. And I'm just asking God, please help me struggle through this. And everybody else is sleeping in the room. And it was kind of the room that they put you upstairs in to be away from everybody, not in the emergency room and not in the intensive care ward, but it's in God's hands now, type of thing. And she wakes up. Now, she's not all there, but she's up there, and she's able to kind of mumble and things like that. And she's stable enough there that we make the decision, because we can sit there because it was inevitable things are going to start happening, or bring her home. And through the programs that they have for when you're in terminal ill situation, we brought her home, and I'm taking care of her. But she's able to get up a little bit there, and I got a little bit of picture and video of her playing a hacky, or not hacky, but you throw the little bag to throw in the hole, corn in the hole, and her with one of her sons and all that, and we're doing things. And I cooked one of her favorite meals. We used to love cooking together, but she's not able to do these things. And we're sitting out on the deck with her sons and their spouses and myself, and you could see they knew it too. Of course, at this point in time, we were in time thing. Less than 6 weeks later, she's passed. And this devastated me. This is the entire summer. So my mind is not there. I haven't fished. I'm not going to go fishing since I did that tournament with her on the Susquehanna. So this 3 years ago, that entire summer is shot. So I haven't fished. So move on. It's kind of getting cold. I'm not fishing, all that. Lo and behold, my second knee is starting to give me problems. I know I got to have that second total knee replacement. I have that. The second summer is totally shot from going fishing. And then my mother also had passed away. So again, like I say, this is 2 summers in a row. I don't do. I haven't even picked up a fishing rod that goes on. And then the third summer and all that, I had met somebody else that I would be with, and I thought it was going to work, and it didn't. But we'll just leave it at that for right now. But lo and behold, what is discovered on the side of my jaw there? A little bump. She was the medical doctor, and thank God that she did, because she helped discover it. And at stage one, which would normally you wouldn't, most people would
Jesus God.
overlook, and go to the doctor. And I got, I won't call it the straight line, but I had somebody that was in my corner who basically knew the ins and outs of how to straight line it to get treatment, et cetera, et cetera. And come to find out, lo and behold, what did I have? I had stage one squamous cell carcinoma of the tongue. There's a whole bunch of other things, but the key thing is it was stage one and positive 16, which would also mean is it was quote unquote treatable. So they're going to initially, do a biopsy, and hopefully, because she was able to convince them to cut it out at that same time there, because they knew it was the stage one localized event, but they couldn't do it because my head would not be able to extend back to an old military parachuting boo boos that I had. If you're jumped out of airplanes and hit the pavement there, you know how hard your body bangs off the ground. I did that for 17 of my 24 years in the Army. So I played hard
Jesus.
Army. We'll leave it at that. But now, I got to get treatment. And so this is all happening. Boom, last summer in the prime of fishing season that's going on there. So I've done zero. And to add misery to heartache, this isn't sitting there and my wife finding that, and I'm the person that is, it's not me, but my wife, but this is me that is in the seat that's getting this news there. And anybody that knows anything about squamous cell carcinoma, there's many different types of cancers, but this particular one it's a nasty little thing there. Can be dealt with, but it's a nasty, and still is a nasty event that goes on in my life each and every day. So I'm doing then chemotherapy and radiation, and it is brutal. I lose about 60 pounds of body weight. There's at one point in time, I rather stop the chemotherapy that's going on, because it's so bad that I don't know if I'm going to live. And I'm on this teetering edge if they're going to put me in an intensive care ward for the last end of it there, which is not uncommon, or not. And so that's why hey, I'd rather die at this point. And I still needed to get at least one more chemotherapy. So from 5, I missed 6, and I do 7th treatment there. But it is, like I say, brutal. So the end state was that uh, I complete the vast majority, 6 out of 7 chemotherapies, 35 radiation treatments, where they've fried my entire lymph node system on the bottom of my neck, and so forth. So, when am I supposed to go fishing? And, that's a 5 day a week lifestyle that from June to July or to the end of July, August that, I'm doing. And then there's weeks after that, you still have the effects of the radiation at its max intensity that's going on. I couldn't eat because of how everything was as raw and everything going. And if my voice sounds kind of rough or weird right now, it's because I still have all this secondary effects that go lymphedema and hypothyroidism that's going on and stuff, which leads into the aftermath. So by September of last year, I'm just a zombie. And I'm going through this stuff, and I've got all this secondary stuff that's going on. And I got appointments that are going out the wazoo because you have to do all the follow up and things, which of one of the things that would be is every couple of months I got to go get re-examined. I just had a note popped up on my screen here, and I close it out there about my next go to get checked out by my oncologist team about this this coming week, a Friday for that stuff. But anyways, the main point being is it's consuming me. I've got this fatigue. I can barely do anything. I haven't fished everything that's going. You name it, I've got a problem. But I'm starting to slowly gain some, not all functions, and go forward. So I come to a conclusion at a point in time, and that is, and by then it's now become an early winter time that's going on. It's of course not going to be kayak fishing thing. I got a point in my life. I got to do something about this because I don't want to be that person that coulda, shoulda, woulda, and not do it as my life is getting better. And I want to enjoy what I may or may not have a life. You don't know if tomorrow morning something's going to happen or not. And especially the older you get, like I'm getting into right now. So I wanted to do it. So I decided I wanted to party like a rock star in 1999. And anybody understands that reference, you get it and all that's happening. So I decided I'm going to go party like a rock star here. And I decided to get myself some kayaks. I said plural, kayaks. Why? The Hobie Pro Wrangler that I had was the latest one that I had, was getting up in age and thing. I hadn't used it in a couple of years. And why not get a new one? Pimp it out. Pimp my ride. That was what I was going to do. Um, put it in the back of my pickup truck bed and hauling it was always a tough thing, but I didn't have the strength to do things like that like I used to. So I'm going to get a trailer, and I want somebody to go with me at times. So what do I do? I get that trailer. I've got that, and I get a second kayak for those that don't have kayaks or not. So I now bought a Lynx. It's also a little bit more friendlier for skinnier, smaller waters that I would want it for. I'm going to get some more kayaks, and I'll talk about that in a second. That goes on, and in that particular bit, I ordered these things, and I wanted them to be decked out. I mean, pimp my ride to the max. And so, now by this time here in the spring and all that, it's tough. I'm not moving like I used to on things, but I'm getting back into it. So the first tournament I do was of all places on the Shenandoah River. And I've fished there many a times, but not to the level I wanted to do. But I still did the uh, Bass Nation tournament there. I did,
And we're
fish
at this year,
first.
right? For
What's that?
timeline, we're in 2025 now.
That's correct. We're in 2025, and I go out and do that. Um, I didn't do as good as I could have done, but I didn't do as bad. Like, if I didn't know what I was doing, at least something there. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to learn and build off of this. And like I say, I'm going to go out and do these things. Between this and go to some music concerts for this season. Yeah, I've been, again, spending like a drunken sailor, but I don't care. I got the money to do it. Do it. And I've done it there. Then after that, the next, I got, like I say, a couple of music concerts. Then I go to Lake Champlain. I didn't get to go up there at the pre-fish as much as I was originally going to go do, because I had to help somebody out with they had a family situation, not my family, but somebody I know. But I did drive all the way down to Florida, take care of that stuff, then drive back up here, put my camper on my truck, and tow my kayak and headed up there. First day of fishing on Champlain was a washout because there's like 20 something mile an hour winds, white caps, and I'd never been on Champlain. I'd been on the other end of New York, but never on that end of New York State, fishing. And then the next day I go out there and I catch some decent amount of fish, but it's in a little bit more protected water spot. The morning of the tournament that begins there, I haven't fished this spot at all, but I got enough of an idea of what I'm going to go to. I go out launch like everybody else. I'm one of the first ones at the launch site, but I'm the last one to actually launch, because again, it's a lot more tougher for me to do things because of all the fatigues and everything else that I have from my cancer and the previous Guillain-Barré syndrome, total knee replacements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I get out there, excuse me, and I start catching fish. They're not big ones because I haven't been able to do things that I hadn't, for some reason I couldn't get my active targeting to work, and that would have been where I would have been doing even better if that had worked for this tournament that goes on. But I get out there and I find my sweet spot, and I'm catching fish, bangity bangity bang. And I'm getting on the board. I get my 5 fish limit, and darn, I'm getting back into that groove there of stuff. Tournament ends. Like I say, I finished 104 out of 154 people there. Not great, but not as bad as a lot of other people there. But I had a pattern that I figured out for them. That was the key there. That my mind and my skill set of what I have, I was able to figure out how to do a pattern based on the difference of kayak fishing versus bass boat fishing. Bass boat fishing, as you well know, is you don't do well, you go to your next hole, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because you just run and gun. But kayak fishing, you can't do that. You have to be more focused, and so you do a little bit more targeting, research, analysis. Well, that was right up my alley. That was the kind of work I did in the military, is understanding how to do reconnaissance, targeting, research, et cetera, et cetera. So I got a mindset for this kayak fishing like that. So again, I did do as good as I could, but I did I'm back in the game. I come back here, and I didn't get my active targeting fishing, which was good and bad, for which will become the tournament that I go to, which lucky me, would happen. But bam, I'm getting ready to go, and I go down there, and I decide that, again, I'm going to go camping, do a little bit of practice, and figure out what I'm going to do. As I get down there on the Chick, I first thought that I've never been there before, that it's all one single thing. Oh no, it's not. There is the lake, and then there is the river with a little barrier in between, because I never understood the boundaries. What it makes with the Walker's Dam. Why would you have that? I've been through uh, 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 dikes and all that, going through it before. So I didn't understand, but I would understand, of course, later on there. And I'm about to launch on the lake part, which was the campground I was next to. And this old gentleman there, who's also going to be doing the tournament there, but that's where he wanted to fish, he told me about that. Whoa, stop. So before launching my kayak, I tie it back down, go a mile down, and I launch at the next place, which is just on the other side of the lock dam area and all that. And this is the day before the tournament's going to begin, and I'm fishing there. And if you've ever been there, it is tidal influence. Well, I love tidal stuff there. I did a lot of tournaments, and I've done a lot of fishing on the lower Occoquan and then the Potomac River. So I know the whole bottom line up front, what you got to know about tidal fishing. So I'm going there, but here's the best part about it. I'd done back to my research. I knew that everything was going to be in line for this tournament. The stars, the moon, the tides, you name it, they were all aligned through some of the research I'd done through several different apps, and we'll call it the technical side of things, and the water geo underneath there, the different things there, the tidal, like I say, all that was all going to come together. But it's on the practice I'm fishing, and here's the irony of all things: I caught a couple really big fish. Got my little pictures, as like say, to prove it there. But I caught them all on the docks. And of all things I caught them on was a micro TRDs. Now, I'm kind of, wondering, what does this mean here that I was catching them? When I say big ones, I caught a 20-inch and a 19-inch by a dock and all that. And I half the time I've been, dealing with moss and muck and everything on the hooks. I couldn't throw it out in all the other waters, but I love fishing those TRDs, the small micro finesse.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, maybe that will be the pattern. But it then kind of plays out that I go on the other side in one of the creek channels that's coming there, and boom, I catch another one. This time I catch it on a larger crawdad, dragging it there. So I know that maybe to look at this stuff too. The day is in. I go back. I get myself ready for the next morning, which is going to be tournament day. And I get there, and it's kind of the same thing has happened. I'm one of the first people there to get ready to rig it because I know I need the extra time. But actually getting launching on the water, I'm not the first, but I'm not the last either. I know that. And I go out there, and because of back to health, especially, I happen to have a torpedo motor on the back there, and I'm going down. And I didn't do any up or top water fishing on the practice really, but I'm going to go down. The channel I'm going to go into, there's a bass boat there that's right there where I was going to go and fish. Yeah, oh well, can't do that thing. So I go down to the next one, which is about maybe 150 yards further, and I go in there. I'm the first person there.
Wow.
Now, this is where it's going to get interesting. I am at 6:10 because of that little bit extra time, et cetera, et cetera. I get there and I've shut off and I'm getting ready and I'm looking at the water and there are boils. There's just boils everywhere. And I'll freely admit that I've been guilty before that 1 minute before fishing, I may throw out there and test, or I just want to get ready to throw. But I made a promise to myself, and this was my aspect of faith. God, I'm a sinner. I make a lot of sins and I've cut corners, et cetera, et cetera. But if they said 6:15, I'm not going to touch that water till 6:15. And temptation was there. Oh my God, temptation was there. I look at my telephone there on the time, and the GPS finally said 6:15. And I let that bad boy zip. And like I said, I've seen all these boils that they're definitely feeding. And at the mouth there, I think that's where all the bait fish were at, the tides. Everything is perfect conditions. And not the first cast, but the second cast. Oh, and it was right at the reed. You could see the exposed reeds, and then there was the little bit of the current of the tidal influence. It hit the water, and I thought I got hung up on the weeds as I was going to start, my working act. It was the whopper plopper. It wasn't the smallest, but the next size bigger than that whopper plopper. And I'm going to the start it, and it does. It's pulling, and all of a sudden it zips. And I said, "Oh boy, we're on!" And I'm just starting to reel and reel, and this bad boy is going up to the surface near the boat, and I say, "Oh my goodness, Mother Jesus, that is a monster!" And I'm wheeling, and I'm trying to bring it, and luckily my drag was just there that it was tight enough, but it wasn't loose where and it was perfect. I couldn't have hossed that fish if I had wanted to, so I had to play him out, and I'm holding the pole so that my wrist and the flex of the pole was taking all the yin and yang out of that thing, and then finally the fish gets tired, comes up there, and I'm not going to grab the net because I don't want to fool around with something of that nature. And I should say I was holding the pole in my left hand because I'm a left-hand fisher, and I reach down there and I grab that fish by the jaw, and I'm making sure that I don't get any hooks in my hand either at this time because that's the last thing I need to have is
Mm-hmm.
treble hooks in there. I lift this thing in the boat, and I realize this is a monster. When I say monster, it's a monster of a fish that's going on. And I'm shaking a little bit there. Now, the Hobie Pro Angler is very kind of forgiving in a sense, is because of the sides and all that, that the fish is not as easily to plop out. But I'm ready that I'm going to plop on top of this thing and kind of pile drive to keep her, from, it's a female, I can tell that, of it getting out of there. I reach behind, I pull out my measuring board, and I put my measuring board, and this fish is almost like, again, a godsend, because it didn't want to flop out. It just laid there perfectly on that board for me to take my picture.
Mm.
I would think that I was being touched by an angel to help me. I get that picture, and because the fish are still boiling, I put it out, and I've done a couple more casts, like 5 or 6 more casts, and I catch the next one, which would be my second largest fish of the day. There, the same thing, same scenario, the whole bed that's going down there, and I'm thinking it's going to be like, wow, what experience this is going to be today. My mind is also thinking, if I'm catching them, everybody else is probably doing the thing.
Yep.
So, it is what it is type of thing. You fight it out the same way as everybody else. Everybody's equal. Everybody started off at the same time. Everybody had the same everything to catch the same exact fish that you're catching too. So I'm not looking at anything on the boards. I'm not doing any of that sort of stuff. I'm just focusing on catching fish. I should have caught a couple more there, but I didn't. I lost a bunch, and I'll talk about that. I then, because the sun by then is going to start coming up a little bit, I'm going to switch, and that's going to be about my secret sauce, I like to call it, in a moment that goes on. And so I get those two, and I go kind of a little bit of a break, and I go ahead and I put them onto the leaderboard. I'm on 4th place. Woo-hoo. Hey, 35 people. Everybody started off in first place, so 4th place would mean that I could be in 35th place by the end of the day because everybody else outfishes me. I accept that sort of stuff. But I'm not now. I'm starting to fish a little bit different, and what I end up doing is, as the tide is starting to lower down and the weeds are going to get a little bit thicker, and I can't fish the top water like I wanted it to, I decided I'm going to try something different there. And the night before, I had taken out a Z-Man big fat TRD worm, which is their biggest one they make. And I had decided to put into it there on the back of it was one of these VRC willow blade flashing trailers, right? And if you put that on a regular worm, the worms can rip apart, as you well know. I put it on that because they're kind of expensive. And so I knew the TRD with its Elastec would be a very strong worm. I put it on a darker color but it had a little bit of sprinkling flash to it too. And I would rig that up. And I would then miss, like I say, 4 fish. 2, I think, were bigger than the first one. God is my witness. I think they were bigger than that. And after the first 2 miss and all that goes on, I go to the other side because I'm kind of getting frustrated, and the water's starting to get a little bit lower. And, all that exposed water, I knew that the fish were going deeper and all that. I was fishing the worm where it would hit it and it would sink. If you take the weeds like that, it was sinking at I call it like a 6 to 8 inch level in the weeds going through there. And if the fish are down here, I was hoping they'd see that. Maybe they would, maybe not. And like I say, I lost a couple there. But I go to the other side, back to where all the docks are. And there's some also area there where there's some weeds that are in between a lot of these docks. Remember, I told you on the first day, the frustration with weeds and the TRD, which I'm not going to fish for this tournament, but I go over there. As I come to the first dock, literally on the other side of the spot I was fishing, the first cast, I was more throwing it out there just to get the line stretched out and any kind of possible bird's nest, et cetera, out of it there. I hook on the fish. And that one there is, again, an 18-inch fish that goes on. Woo, something's going on here.
How many fish do you have at this point?
What's that?
How many fish do you have at this point?
By this time, I've only got 3 fish that are going on. Now, I got to also tell you now what happens, because I lost those other 2 fish. And one of those fish I lost, I brought him up to the boat, and
Oh.
I'm getting ready to reach down. That's when I told you I thought he was as big as the other ones, and he lets go as I'm literally trying to put my thumb there. Let's go, and the hook had not gone through the worm. Now you can understand, that particular bit, and I still don't know how he held on to it. Came all the way to the boat, couple rolls, blah blah blah, going on. Lets it go, and the worm hadn't gone through the hook. I don't know, but that's what happened. And so I'm understanding that that the hook could get fouled up by worms. That's a very common problem that goes on, on a thing. I have an extra wide gap and all that, but it's still kind of in line. It wasn't a massive gap that's going on there of stuff with it. So by this time, because I've lost this one here, and and I need to get more fish. I need to get to that fourth place. How do I get better if I don't? Get my little 5 fish limit that's going to go on there. So the next one I'm going, and I would lose this fish too. I'm going to set the hook, and I lost it. So what happens then? Literally, I know what they want, but and I'm casting to the right spot, and I literally am going to say that's where the fish is, at this one spot where the dock, the shoreline, and the weeds were all located. And I cast there, and I set the hook. But the problem was, when I set the hook on that fish, like everything, the energy I had, because I wanted to get through the stretch of the line and set that hook. I reached. I mean, I'm just pulling everything that I could possibly do. And you know what I do? I break the seat, the cable on my Mirage, or no, or yeah, the Hobie seat. It cable snaps, so I have no back piece, and I'm now bit there, and lo and behold, I got a problem. I don't have all the fish. I can't quit at this point in time. But how am I going to fish through all of this? And so I had to kind of modify. I'm standing up sometimes. I'm, kind of just, leaning forward as I'm doing some fishing. I finally catch that fifth fish later on, and all of that sort of stuff. But I'm not able to fish the way I had wanted to, but I'm going to catch fish, and it is what it is of stuff. I catch a couple other tiny little dinks that weren't even worth, the scoring of, being put on the board there. But the end of the time comes at that bit. I go back, and I didn't get to look at the board because they shut it down. I don't know where I stand. Um, I get back, and I decide that I got to take a shower because I know I smell like funky fish. I know that I did pretty good there, from what I had fished there, especially that first fish. That was that bonus fish people like to talk about all the time, and which I get cleaned up. I've dropped my boat off at the turn. Then I make the little drive, come all the way down, and I'm there. And I didn't see the text message in which Sean had sent me. Wanted to know if I was going to be there at the final bit. And when I finally parked my vehicle, and I saw that message, and ooh, must be important there. And I come in there, and he happened to see me. And I guess he figured out who I was and all that sort of stuff. And said, "Glad you're here," and all that sort of stuff. And I said, I must be somebody, so I can't say anything. And then they go through, and then, I saw where he said only 12 people had limited out. Well,
Wow.
that then says that I'm one of those people. And then he started going through the list of people that, were, the placing along the way there. My name ain't been called yet. And all of a sudden, that it's down to the last 2 people, and my name ain't been called yet, but there's only so many people limit out. Either they didn't, but what he had also said is what their length of total fish was, and mine was far more. Like somebody was in the 70s, somebody's in or I say late upper 60s. Then there's the 70s, and then the number 2 person had 82 inches, and I knew I had 91 and a half inches of fish. And so, kind of the Cheshire Cat grin. I knew that I was going to be the one. And then, lo and behold, he called my name. And I'd finally done it. Instead of being the bridesmaid, I got to be the bride today. Yippee ki yay! There was a couple like in tournaments before I, just outside the money, or I had done things over the years, I should say, of this sort of stuff. I knew what I was doing, but I hadn't fished. I'd had all this wretched diverse or things that happened to me for the past couple of years, and I'm getting back into the game. I got the time, I got the wherewithal knowledge of what to do here. That would mean that I'm always going to succeed. But I had what it could do there, as I heard one time. One of the top guys of kayak fishing there say it's 100% of the water, 90% of the fish are in 10%. That
Hmm.
means is you got to find that 10%. Then you got to know that uh, 90% of the lures can work, but only 10% will do what it takes that particular day to do something there. And I found I called the secret sauce. And what it was again was the biggest of the worms that Elastic had, and it had that trailer. So what I think was going on is that it was floating through the weeds, regardless of the tidal influence there. It was floating through the top. They're looking at it before, and it said, "Bite me." And I knew enough is that if you let them look at it too long, they're going to say that's fake. You had to give it, they had to make that decision. It's kind of like going to Vegas is, do I put the money down on that number or not on the roulette wheel, which I would do last weekend. That's why we couldn't do this last weekend. But you decide that last second, and lo and behold, it was the number that you won today. You were the bug and not the windshield. And so I got lucky in one sense, but it wasn't luck as in anything. My hands and all my knowledge was through God helping me to be successful that day. And maybe it was because I didn't throw the lure in at 0614. I waited to 0615. I followed the rules of God. Thou shalt not. And, he rewarded me. I don't know. But my faith in God is always been strong, and this is the icing on the cake that it was the perfect time for me on this tournament.
Ross, so many things that you've gone through is just about overcoming adversity. And for people at home that are going through things in their life, how did you do it? How is it with everything that God threw at you? You just kept chugging along. You kept chugging along. And then
Um,
even in the tournament, like the kayak broke and then no issue. You just kept chugging along. You just, it never broke you.
I like to say I was lucky in the grand scheme of 7 billion people in the world. I had a family that faith was strong. So when I was young, duty, expectations, and faith set me, I think, was I a little bit wild and did some crazy things? Absolutely. And I'm not perfect. No, far from it. I am a sinner, and I've made many sins, and I didn't do things the way I should have. But I also learned from my mistakes there that doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, and never forget your beginnings and why you're here. So I got lucky in that sort of stuff there. And I would pass that on to my children there. I didn't let them figure it out on their own. I gave them a sense of purpose. And so that goes on. And at age 18, instead of going off to college and all those kind of things, I joined the Army. And this is 1979. And if anybody knows what the United States Army was in 79, it was going through its own changes. But I go to the first unit in which high level expectations were there. And again, 1980 was a very rough year. We had the Iranian hostage situation that literally developed as I'm coming into the Army. And also, too, and all that, the unit I go to was the one that sent people there on what we call Desert One operation. Not my company, but my sister company, and things like that. And I also had seen over the first early years of people that were not with us. They were some close friends that got killed, and I learned that your life is not where you're Superman and you can beat any and all things. You had to understand you had balances. You need to be laser focused on things. I was originally not going to stay in the Army. I was going to get out, but I, at the last moment, decided it was the best damn thing I ever did in my life because it gave me structure of things. Back to what I did. I was an Army Airborne Ranger infantryman, and you have to work through diversity. What are you going to do? You're in the middle of nowhere, and excuse my language, shit has hit the fan. Who are you going to call? There ain't nobody. It's you. You and your small group. You have to rely on your team, your group, your small unit there, and you have to fight through any and all diversity. Suck it up, Buttercup. You got to win. Nobody cares about second place, and second place isn't going to be there to receive second place trophy that's going on. There's only one winner in a outcome, and that guided my life and has guides it to this day. You got to deal with what's before you. As a student of history, those that have lived history before and don't learn from it, they are doomed to repeat those failures. But also too, in learning the history, what did it take, the cojones, for somebody to be on a landing craft going to the beaches of Omaha, knowing what they face? They could cry and pout and I'm not going, but it wasn't. They were there. They were landing. So they fought through that thing to land. Some of them didn't make it. Some of them did. And I will never be as worthy as all those people before me. Trust me. And I have some friends that have done far more than I would have ever done. But I have to be strong enough to be that. If I'm going to be a role model to my kids and to others, to do something, I have to set the example for them. And that's how I want to live. You can't live forever. It's like this cancer. Oh, it lives in my brain each and every day, that, the hideous nature if it comes back. And it probably will at some point in time. But you know what? Deal with it. Don't let it beat you, because you'll cower in a corner. You boo-hoo. I know I'm not going to win this tournament, and I'm going to boo-hoo. Or you know what? You fight and fight and fight to win. Winners are survivalists.
Ross, I really appreciate you coming on today. Just everything, going from your service, what you've had to deal with, and how you've been able to overcome adversity. Because I think a lot of people will get upset, boo-hoo, I lost a tournament, or boo-hoo, I don't like a social media post. And then here you are, not only with everything you've done serving your country, the hell you went through personally, and to be able to pull yourself up and be like, I'm going to go live still. And adversity hit again, and I'm going to keep fighting. And now you are in the winner's circle after everything you've been through. You're the winner of the last Virginia Bass Nation Kayak Series event on the Chick Lake and Chickahominy River. Is there anyone we can give a shout out to, or anyone we can say thank you for or promote?
Oh, those are my past that brought me to this point in time, both from my military service, my family, my military service, and especially my spouse who passed away, Deanne Kirkpatrick McVey, who especially, believed in me. And he's I keep myself going because of that, because one day I know I will see her again. I like to always joke and all that, of my past and all that, being a sinner, that when the day comes to the pearly gates and all that, and I approach the pearly gates there, I'm going to look off on the side there, and there's going to be all the critters of my life, puppy dogs, kitty cats, etc. That's going to be sitting in this box. That's my jury. And there's going to be St. Peter, who's going to be the judge. The prosecutor may or may not be my ex-wife. That's a bad thing myself, because I've forgiven her as time has gone on. But there's going to be that. And my defense attorney is going to be my wife who passed away. And the outcome, either I'm going into heaven in paradise, or, if I'm that bad there, and the case is, such, other things could happen. But I try to live my life in doing right. I got my critters. There are literally two of them right here next to me sleeping on the deck, and two others inside the house that are, wandering around. And I have that sense of duty to take care of them. And sometimes it's tough. I want to go do something and I got to make sure they're taken care of. And I balance out between all those things. But go on. Don't let cancer kill you. It probably is. You have to be true to yourself and honest. But do what you know is right. Do what you know is right with those around you. Make peace. Uh, the world is not perfect. It's got a lot of things. Be true to yourself and true to what you know is righteously right for yourself. And the cards are going to play out whatever they are. Uh, my faith comes from is there a person named God or a different name? You name it. That's up to you. But I know that in life there was a creation. There has to be an alpha and there will be an omega in the Greek alphabet. But more to the point that that leads into is how did the first spark of life ever happen? There had to be a higher being that created it in the trillions of years of life. That first life, two cells coming together and then complexity to where we are now. I call that God. And if God has expectations that I need to have in life, I will do my darndest and try to live up to that. It's not easy, it's not perfect, but I have to do that and be responsible for what my actions are. I can't blame the devil made me did it. I can't, blame it on somebody else or whatever. I have to have just that. And I want everybody to know that you can't worry about what others think about you. You have to worry about yourself. Me, myself, and I are the only ones that judge me um, in the ultimate end of their each and every day of going forward. But for a lifestyle, all my bills get paid, all my everything is taken care of, and I just want to enjoy life by doing a few fishing. I'm going to go fish the Upper Potomac River. I haven't fished it as much as I should have, but I'm going to the next couple of days get out there and try to figure that thing out. Make sure uh, I'm going to be as good as I can be, and then I hope to go down and do the Smith Mountain. I fished there a tournament before, and I'm going to do it again there of stuff for that point in time. And I will go a couple days early, pre-fish, and you know what? Whatever happens, happens. And I want to go in there and have fun. Next year, because my body and everything is getting better, I'm getting ready to go and get some more in tournaments. But I did something the other day that I'll throw in here is a interesting bit. For the last 20 years, the 90th percentile, I'll leave it at that, of kayaks that I have fished have been Hobies. I love Hobies. I will always love Hobies. They've always got to be where I am there. I love their pedal drive versus bicycle drive there. The one kayak that I had that was a bicycle drive just didn't work out. And so I immediately went back to Hobies, and I always liked that. But there's a new kayak that has come out that is now I bought the other day. I ordered it, better way to put it there, and it's supposed to be ready by February. That's getting ready to be in prime time fishing season, and asymmetrically, it's going to be the new thing. You may have seen it on the iCast. It is the jet motor propulsion system
Oh
kayak.
my gosh, you got one.
I
Oh,
got
that's
one.
cool.
I can't take the money with me to the grave. I'm going to party like a rock star in 1999. So I ordered one of those things, and I've been doing some correspondence with them, and I'm asking them questions about capabilities of there. They did the initial thing. I got that, but there's a little bit more. Like I want to know about power pole mounting on the thing. I want to know about like how to put an active targeting uh, uh, capabilities on the thing. I want to know about will the spot for the transducer be able to go low enough there so I can do side imaging, but bring it up. Why do I want this?
Mhm.
Well, again, I love my Hobie. It's my Pro Angler. I got the 360 one there. It's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I love it, and it's going to be hard to do something different because I loved having maybe a torpedo on the back, but that still had the pedal drive, like I would call it close quarter combat with a fish and all that, with that kind of a drive. But sometimes you got to look at more than just that. The Hobie still has challenges when you go into some places that's got rocks. What does the Shenandoah River have? Rocks. The one kayak that had the pedal drive, the first time I launched it, I broke the prop blades on, not from, it would bend the full back end if you went over top of it. But if you have a boulder here and you're right beside it, or it's underneath the water there and it clipped off the blade, I'm not going to buy at that time, $50 blades each and every time. Where the Hobie eventually would fold in, that's great, but it still doesn't do certain things. And when you want to go up river, you got to have something that to do that. And I've seen many a jet boat go up there. So I got that kayak because of how the intake is on it there. I'm going to see how it goes over the areas of lower water in the Shenandoah or the Potomac or the Susquehanna, you name the river, of those kind of things there. Why do I love those kind of rivers? You don't have all the boat traffic that you have. You go to Lake Anna. I love it, Lake Anna, except as you know, it can get as crowded as can be. And it gets scary. Sometimes you're playing chicken with the big boats. There you just want to be quiet and tranquil, but you got to fight, just that on any kind of reservoir. Rivers, a lot more quiet, all that kind of stuff that goes on. So I ordered that, that new boat. It's going to be here in February, and I want to get out there. As I talk to them, I want to get it on, and they like that idea too of getting out there, of somebody and showing it off at other tournaments. Because back to Pimp My Ride, half the thing is going to the tournament end of the day, and somebody is checking out what was your pimp ride that you were in. I don't have a problem with technology on a kayak because I'm not fishing in a whale skin and bone kayak there, so I'm not that level of traditionalist. I want it to be somewhat still a kayak, but I like technology on it there. Bass boats and all that. The first Bassmaster tournament, what Ray Scott had them on was basically John boats, and look to where we're at today. So there's been evolution as well as can be expected. You can't hide technology; you just have to deal with it. So those that I want to be a purist. Peace out. To each his own. But for me, I got nothing else, and yes, I have the ability to do a lot more than others. I fully recognize that, but I paid my dues over the last 20 years of the innovation of things. I didn't have the best, I didn't have everything. I made sure all my bills were taken care of, and I've now gotten to that point in time because I can't take it with me. I want to enjoy what I can of fishing and so forth.
Sir, I really appreciate you coming on today. As always, guys, link in the episode description to everything that we talked to. If you have a question for me, just shoot me an email, fishingdmv@gmail.com. You can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. If you'd like to be on the show, or if you know someone that you think really should be on the show to tell their story, please reach out to me, and I'll get it into the schedule. Like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye.
Have a nice day, everybody.
You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.